Okay. 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 Hello, I'm HEEJONG Song at National Institute of Mental Health at NIH. I'm chairing session 29, research at NIH from Women Statisticians. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for giving me the opportunity to lead this session with our NIH Women Statistician. During this session, female statisticians from NIH will present how statistics could be utilized to advance NIH's mission of enhancing health, extending life, and reducing illness and disability. This session is sponsored by Korean International Statistical Society. We have 4 speakers, including myself, and we welcome questions after each presentation to ensure the smooth flow of the session. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A chat. We will address them after the talk. So our first speaker is Dr. HYOYOUNG CHOO-WOSOBA at NCI, National Cancer Institute. Her presentation is titled A Hidden Markov Model Approach for Joint Point Trend Analysis. Please welcome Dr. CHOO-WOSOBA.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me today here. I'm very excited about this the talk because this is my most recent project, which is ongoing project, and basically this is about just analyzing the trend data. So let me first oh, hold on a sec. I'm sorry. I think I need to share the screens, and I think I forgot that. I'm sorry. Hopefully this works.
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay. So can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so again, this is all about analyzing trend data. So let me first talk about the trend data. Okay, so trend data is basically showing upward or downward of all or a specific period of time. So as you see, there are many examples you can easily find. But one of the most challenging challenges for this type of data is to complete the trend profile, specifically where the slopes change or how big the sizes of the slopes are. And a specific statistical challenge, the method for this, for achieving this goal is called joint point analysis. So let me briefly talk about the background of it. So as you can see at the right bottom corner, this is just an example of trend data. And as you see, there are 4 data points where the slope changes. And these particular data points are called joint points. So basically, this main goal for joint point analysis is to identify where the joint points are with the corresponding slopes estimated under an optimal number of joint points. And there are many articles out there to achieve this goal, but one of the most typical and common approach is grid search. So grid search creates a grid of all possible locations for joint points specified by the settings and calculates the sum squared error at each one to find the best possible fit. So basically, you need to consider every possible settings of all the observations, which can very easily lead to very heavy computational burden. And right that moment, this computation infeasibility issue motivated us to think about developing a better method that can analyze trend data, but with a large number of joint points. So practically speaking, even more than 10. And I am very delightful to propose our method, hidden Markov model-based joint point analysis, which can handle trend data with even large number of joint points. So let me first show you a typical joint point model structure. Here, the expectation of YT. YT is just the outcome. And the theta naught is the first intercept and the first slope beta 1 with the corresponding time point t. And the rest term is just there to explain the rest of the slopes with the corresponding joint points here, tau. But the main idea of our approach based on hidden Markov model is the way to perceive the trend data. So with this example of 3 different joint points, under the hidden Markov model, the structure, these observable data points are manifested through an unobservable latent variable hidden state ST. So this ST basically creates different sections or different segments at the point where the hidden state changes. And those corresponding, the data points are the joint points that we ultimately want to identify. So conceptually, this first equation is the way to understand the data a typical way, for example, under research. But our method based on the hidden Markov model understands the data which is segmented or sectionized by this unobservable latent variable hidden state. So let's take a look at a little bit detail about this hidden Markov model structure. So hidden Markov model basically consists of 2 different parts, unobserved variable hidden state and observed variable ZT. ZT is nothing but just difference between 2 successive original count outcome here, basically YT minus 1. The reason why you consider this the ZT, this difference, instead of directly using the original outcome YT is because this is more naturally fitting to the hidden Markov model framework. So for unobservable latent variable hidden state, we assume this ST follows a Markov chain with the initial probability here and the transition probability AIJ. Particularly for this project, AIJ, we consider birth process transition probability, and we will talk about this later more detail. And for the observed variable ZT, we also assume the distribution of ZT conditional on the hidden state are independent to each other. And this conditional distribution of ZT is called emission distribution with the corresponding parameter set phi here. All right, so let's talk about the birth process transition metrics. So we have several constraints that make sense in joint point analysis. So with an example of hidden state 4 on the right-hand side, or equivalent to 3 joint points, there are only 2 possible transition status, either staying in a current state. So with an example of a state of 1, then it will stay as 1 with the probability 1 minus P1, or consecutive states. So for this example, it will be 2 with the probability of a P1. And they'll be explained by these 2 constraints. And that is why it is called birth process, because the transition will only go in a non-negative direction. And once the hidden state reaches out to the largest status, in this case, it will be 4, then it will stay as a state of 4 with the probability of 1 for the rest of the hidden states. And they'll be explained by the 3rd equation. And last, all the hidden state sequence will start with state of 1, with the probability of 1. And they'll be explained by this last constraint. So with this specific birth process transition metrics, all you need to do is to just apply the hidden Markov model typical estimation procedure, which is the EM algorithm, to identify where the joint points are and the corresponding slopes. So it sounds very straightforward and easy like ice cream, but the life is really not that easy, right? In fact, for this particular project, we have very interesting statistical challenge. So if you take a look at our hidden Markov model observed variable ZT, they're still correlated, even conditional on the hidden state. So let's take a look at a little bit closer to this Z1 and Z2 as an example. Z1 is Y1 minus Y0, and Z2 is Y2 minus Y1. So even conditional on their corresponding hidden states, Z1 and Z2 still share this Y1 information. So they are obviously correlated, which violates, though, the conditional independence of the emission distribution as a part of a hidden Markov model assumption. So to incorporate this, we not just only condition the current time point hidden state ST, but also the previous time point hidden state ST-1 and the previous time point, the outcome ZT-1. So in that way, we can incorporate this challenge and also hold the conditional independence assumption. So with this specific, this unique emission distribution and the birth process transition probability, we propose this two-step algorithm for our estimation procedure. For this project, we consider the normal distribution for the emission distribution. The reason why it is called normal approximation is because our original outcome is count, but we pretended as continuous, that's why. And here's the main flow of our algorithm. I will not going to talk about detail, but basically at the first step, we assume the constant variance for our original outcome YT. And under this assumption, we first identify the hidden states by selecting the hidden state that gives us the largest posterior probability for the corresponding the hidden Markov model observed variable ZT. And then we finally identify where the joint points occur by looking at the data points of changing this hidden state. So based on this identify joint points at the first step, we obtain. At the second step, we re-estimate all the parameters, including the slopes, variance components in a scale, and the first intercept to obtain the final estimate. The reason why we added this extra step is because to account for any potential dispersion as part of our original outcome characteristic, which is the count data. So more specific, we said the variance of YT is not just on a single scale, which is just variance component, but also as a function of the expectation of YT, which is here, the mu t. So in that way, we can incorporate any potential dispersion. All right, so we almost there to achieve our mission, but there's one last task remain to complete the mission, which is the optimal number of joint points. Because in the real world, we still don't know what is the optimal number of joint points. It depends on the data set. So to do that, we consider AIC or BIC based on a local likelihood function, but which is attainable at the first step as part of our two-step algorithm. And here's just the definition of AIC and BIC, although I'd like to emphasize one thing, that this, the local likelihood as a function of AIC and BIC is obtained based on the first step estimate, not the second step. So I'd like to just emphasize for that. All right, so now we done finally, ready to apply our method now to the real data set, which is the most fun part. And here, I'd like to show you this COVID-19 weekly new death cases in Maryland data. This data is available at the CDC website here that I found, and particularly I am interested in this time period. And the right-hand side, literally you can see the real observation value, the trend data. As you can see, there are many the shifting ongoing here. And the left-hand side is literally the part of the real data set that I use. The far right-hand side, this column is our original outcome, the YT. So for the hidden Markov model process, we actually use the difference between the two successive outcomes. And again, because we don't know the optimal number of joint points for this particular data set, we calculate the AIC for all different joint points, and based on the AIC, we determine 13 as the optimal number of joint points for this particular example. And here is the final, the trend profile based on our method. And there are two different trend profile. The red line is the trend profile, but based on the first step estimate, which is obtained under the constant variance assumption for our original outcome. Here, this observed variable. And the blue, or I think a blue-greenish, this line is the final estimate-based trend profile. And it looks like those two lines are pretty similar to each other across the sections. But there are some sections that you see a little bit deviation here. So for this data set example, it looks like the final estimate step-based trend profile explained better this trend data in terms of explaining the observed variables a little bit closer. That's all actually I have to show you for the result. And here's the references. And I'd like to thank you, Dr. Paul Albert, who helped me get involved in this very exciting projects. So I'd like to mention that. And this is my real last slide. I like to finish my talk with this quote from Mary Cox, as you probably already know, very well known as the First Lady of Statistics. So that's it. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for your attention. Hopefully I didn't use over 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. I mean, it was wonderful talk, and you are not over your time. So thank you very much for keeping on time as well. And we have one question from attendee, the Q&A chat. So our attendee asked us, is the programming code freely available for this new joint point analysis method?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me, because this is still an ongoing project. Of course, I will happy, share my programming code, but not right now, unfortunately, because it's still ongoing. But after I wrap it up, I plan to make an R package for this. So hopefully anybody can easily use. Yeah, but thank you for asking this. Yeah, I'm also really look forward to complete this project and make the R package for this. Thank you.
Okay, so given the time constraint that we have, I'd like to move on to the next speaker. Our Dr. JEESUN Jung at NIH National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Her presentation title is a novel methylation-based stress score and epigenetic age acceleration in alcohol use disorder. Please welcome Dr. Jung.
Okay. Can you see my slide? Can you see my slide?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we can see your slide, but not in the slideshow mode.
Okay, so can I start?
Yeah, the screen that you shared with your slide and your note. Just
what? Okay. So, but I don't know how to do the, yeah. Let me see.
Maybe.
Yeah.
One down. Oh, one more down. There is a slideshow.
Yeah, let me start over. How about now?
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay. Yeah. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, but not in the
slideshow. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. Today, thank you for giving me an opportunity to present one of my research. The title, the novel methylation-based stress score and epigenetic age acceleration in alcohol use disorder. before I start my talk, I would like to introduce a little bit about the terminology that I can use. So epigenetics refer to the heritability change in the gene expression arise from the change in a chromosome without any change of DNA sequence. There are three processes of epigenetics. First one is histone modification, and then DNA methylation and the non-coding RNA. Today, my talk is based on the DNA methylation. So DNA methylation, okay, structure or called like the methyl group are added or like the removed across the DNA sequence. The CPG site is make a turn on the gene and turn off the genes. Then the location is called the CPG site. And the most latest epigenetic chips is based on the Illumina epi chips, where each subject has 850,000 CPG site information. So now, let me start with the background of biological age. So we all have two measures of age. So one is a chronological age, which is a calendar year since birth, and everybody has the same speed of age. And the other is biological age. Your organs and cells and tissues has a different phase of aging with the different speed. And for example, like if your age is 50 in the chronological age and your biological age is 45, then the risk of your aging related conditions such as heart disease is the same or similar to the risk that the age 45 people are facing. So there were the 6 different biological age measured by the methylation, DNA methylations. Then the first generation of epigenetic clock is a whole base pen tissue and the Hanome's clock, which is predicting the chronological age. And as a second generation of the clock, pheno age and the Grimm age were developed to predict the physiological age, linking to the time to death and the mortality and the life, the span. And lately, the methylation-based telomere length was proposed as a proxy of telomere, the leukocyte telomere length. Each epigenetic clock has a different aspect of the biological age. So as you see, like the one of region epigenetic age is highlighted nowadays is that DNA methylation is influenced by the environment vector very sensitive way. So that like we already know that the smoking and chronic heavy alcohol consumption and poor nutrition and like the stress and childhood trauma are making the biological age accelerated. The opposite behavior of behavior is like the smoking cessation and like the reasonable alcohol intake and the balanced diet make biological age decelerate or reverse. So today I'm going to talk about how we measured the biological stress and the biological alcohol consumption that make a biological age accelerated. So method, like the stress triggers alcohol behavior and like the influence or stage of alcohol related misuse, including alcohol initiation and the duration and like the relapse. However, stress is defined by the multiple forms and like such as like the stress exposure and the stress response, as well as physiological outcomes. And each individual differences of perception of stress may overestimate or underestimate of the stress of effect. Therefore, we propose 2 steps to develop reliable and like the reliable stress measures. So first step is to use the factor analysis to construct the composite score of stress using the 13 stress-related variables listed here. The second step is to use penalized regression model to predict the composite, to select CPG site, predicting the composite score of stress. Then we performed like the association study between the aging and like the stress and alcohols. First step is factor analysis. So factor analysis is the method to identify the hidden, latent, meaningful factors among the observed variables. Then these factors most likely contain the most efficient and the essential information from the original variables. So our factor analysis with Berry-Max notation provide like the 3 independent factor scores. First one, consider explaining that like the childhood trauma and the adulthood trauma and like physiological outcome. So we add up these 3 independent factors to construct the composite score of stress. As you see that this composite of stress is highly correlated with 3 factors as well as 13 stress-related measures. Second step, now we have a composite score of stress from the clinical data. Then we use the elastic net regression model with the combination of bootstrapping approach to select CPG site, predicting composite score of stress as accurate as possible from the whole methylome data. So using the median probability model, we select CPG site when they are presented 500 times out of 500 times out of 1,000 resamplings. As you see the figures on the left right hand side, like the mean scale of error is increased with the stringent of criteria 60% through the 90% of presence in the CPG site. And also the correlation between the composite score and the methylation score is going down as we use a stringent criteria, so that we decide to choose 211 CPG site predicting the composite score of stress. So that based on this 211 CPG site, the methylation score of stress was calculated by the weighted linear combinations. So as a second step, we performed the internal validation using the same bootstrap approach. And at each bootstrap set, we calculate the root of the mean scale of error and R scale to explain how well this 211 CPG site predict the methylation score of stress. The performance of internal validation was reasonably good, as indicated by the low number of RMSE and 0.9 through the 1.24, and high number of R scale, 49 through the 95% in the 1,000 bootstrap sampling. And finally, our methylation score of stress has the correlation with the composite score of stress by the 98%. So before I jumping into the association study between the stress and epigenetic age acceleration, I would like to point out that our 211 selected stress-related CPG site are located on the genes enriched in the cell cycle and the cell junction and regulation of the cell death. Usually stress cell is responding to the stress in a various way from the survival to the cell death. So that the selection of 211 CPG site is well taken to explain the stress-related the biological meanings. Now it's a fun part, and our study shows that the increased composite score of stress is associated with age acceleration in the alcohol use disorder, mainly a second generation of epigenetic clock, like the phenol age and the Grimm age. And among the AUD sample, like the alcohol use disorder sample, top 25% of composite score of stress has the 4 to the 5 years age acceleration, and compared with the bottom 25, the percentile of the composite score of stress, which means the AUD patient with high stress tended to have age acceleration compared with low stress. We observed a very similar pattern of association between the methylation score of stress and epigenetic age acceleration. And additionally, we discovered that the methylation score of stress is highly correlated with the telomere length shortening, which reflect age acceleration. So I didn't explain the previously because of the time constraint, but methylation score of alcohol consumption was calculated by the 450 CPG sites selected by the Generation Scotland cohort of 4,500 sampled. Then our data shows that the age acceleration, biological age acceleration is more kind of elevated by the alcohol than by stress. So given that result, then alcohol and the stress accelerate the biological age. So we dissect our AUD sample by the median split of the methylation score of stress and the alcohol scores. And as you see these figures, then alcohol and the stress score shows nice stepwise increase compared from the reference group of low score of stress and low score of alcohols. Then we replicate that result from the most stress-enriched cohort by the graded trauma project cohort. So conclusion, factor analysis and survivor supervised the machine learning approach provide accurate prediction of biological stress from the massive genetic data, and increased stress is associated with accelerated biological age in the alcohol use disorder. So our newly developed methylation-based prediction of stress shows that stress seems to affect methylation pattern of cell cycle sensitive genes and provide a better understanding of stress-related biological mechanism in the alcohol use disorder. Thank you for listening. hopefully I didn't kind of spend over 50 minutes to.
I think you are on your time, 15 minutes. Thank you for giving time on it. But for our overall 1 hour session, I'd like to move on to the next speaker, Dr. Kang. Our third speaker is Dr. Sunjung Kang at NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health. Her presentation is titled Integrative Modeling of Association Between Acceleratory Derived Sleep, Physical Activity, and Circadian Rhythms Domains and Major Depression. Please welcome Dr. Kang.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share my research with you, and also thank you for those who joined our sessions. And today I'd like to talk about the joint and individual variations of the sleep, physical activity, and circadian rhythmicity, and also their association with mood disorders in a large population-based cohort study. And this is my disclosure. And this is the background. So accelerometry from the mobile devices has been increasingly used as an objective index of sleep, physical activity, and circadian rhythms in people with mood disorders. But however, most prior research has focused on sleep or physical activity alone without consideration of their high level of within and cross-domain intercorrelations. And moreover, few studies have investigated whether these profiles constitute indices of trait markers or state manifestations of the depression. So today I'd like to, the objective of this study is to identify the joint and individual components of the domains derived from the accelerometry, including sleep, physical activity, and circadian rhythmicity, using the joint and individual variation explained method, a multi-model integrative dimension reduction technique. And then secondly, we'd like to examine the associations between joint and individual components with current and remedied major depressive disorders. And before we go to the methods, I'd like to briefly introduce MMARCH, our program at NIMH. It is a abbreviation of the Motor Activity Research Consortium for Health. And it is established as a collaborative effort in order to harmonize the method and measures for the application of actigraphy to studies of mood disorders and also related conditions. And today I'm going to present the data from one of our collaborating sites, the COLAS study, directed by Dr. Martin Preisig from Lausanne, Switzerland. And these are our main three questions. What is the overlap between the domains of sleep, physical activity, and circadian rhythmicity accessed by actigraphy? And are they correlates of the mood disorders, specifically major depressive disorders, or are they state or trait markers? This is the sample characteristics of the study. So we have more than 2,000 participants. This is a prospective cohort study, but we looked at only the wave one at the baseline. So my research, currently it is more like a cross-sectional study at this time, but in the future, we would like to expand to the prospective study. And this is relatively older population with average age of 61 and ranging from 45 to 86. And a little more than half of the population is female. And then as for the clinical diagnosis, 1153, participants had major depression, and 185 has a current MDD at the time of the actigraphy measures, and 968 has remitted. And we have 1164 with no history of MDD. So the features of the sleep physical activity and circadian rhythms were accessed from using actigraphy, which is a wrist-one accelerometer for average of 12 days. This is the watch that we gave to the participants to wear for up to 2 weeks. And then we selected participants, included participants who had at least 7 days of the measurements, and we used the GGIR, the R software, to download these data, and then also our collaborator Weiko developed a pipeline to create features, summary features from the 3 domains using this accelerometry data. Our package called mmarch.ac, which is available for free. And so this method, JIVE, is a abbreviation of joint and individual variation explained. And JIVE decomposes the original multi-domain data into a sum of the 3 components. First, a low-rank approximation capturing the joint variation of the domains. And second, the low-rank approximation capturing variations individual to each domain. And the third, the residual noise. So the imposed rank and orthogonality constraints can be considered as an extension of PCA, the principal component analysis. And then the full details on JIVE and its estimation can be found in the reference below by Locke et al. And so here are the selected features that we include in the study. We could include like hundreds of the features, but to have the interpretation, for the purpose of the interpretation, we included only 28 features from 3 domains. So for sleep domain, we had like sleep onset, wake up midpoint, sleep duration, efficiency, and number of sleep blocks, and number of wake up bouts. I mean, for at least 5 minutes of wake up during the sleep period. And then for physical activity, we selected like total activity count and total log transformed activity count, which is a total volume of the physical activity, as well as the intensity of the physical activity, which is total sedentary time or duration of light activity, light intensity physical activity, and also durations of the moderate to vigorous physical activity. And then some fragmentation features, which is like sedentary to active transition probability and active to sedentary transition probability. And we selected some features for the circadian rhythms. Some of them are like stability of the rhythms, which is like relative amplitude, intraday variation, intraday variability, and intraday stability. And M10 is like most active 10 hours, and L5 is the accelerometry measures of the least active 5 hours. And M10 timing is the midpoint of the M10, and then L5 timing is the midpoint of the L5. And we also included some non-parametric features as well as the functional PCA components. And this is kind of the flow chart of the data processing. So we have like, individuals with multiple days of measures in average 12 days per subject. So we could calculate like subject average as well as subject variability in each features in 3 domains. And we applied 2-step normalization of the average and variability features. That is like for each variables, we ranked all the observation from N1 to N, and then divided the rank by N+1, and then applied the inverse normal CDF, because all these features have different units. Like some of them are like means 3 a.m. for midpoint, whereas like sleep duration is like 7 hours in averages, and like sleep efficiency could be like 85% in averages, etc. So after we converting into transform these variables, in the second step we calculated L2 norm of each domain, and then dividing each variable by this norm for within each domain. So we created these features, and then these are the input for this jive. So after we apply the jive method, these are the jive output. You can see that the right plot on the left side is the jive output from the using average features, and plots on the right side is like jive in output from using the variability features. And you can see that the using the averages of the features, there are lots of overlap between the three domains, especially for physical activity. A lot of variations coming from the joint component, whereas when you look at the variability features, there are much less joint variations, and especially in sleep domain, like essentially all variability is individual to the domain. And then this is kind of important because very little is shared among the features within subject variability features. And you can see that these are the optimal ranks of the joint components, sleep, and individual sleep physical activity, circadian rhythmicity features, and for each in the two studies, outputs of the same study. And so like we do with the regression with principal component analysis, we applied this jive regression with the average features using the major depressive disorder, lifetime, current, and remitted. And you can see that first joint component from the jive and the second component are associated with both current and remitted MDD, whereas the fourth jive joint component is only associated with MDD current and not associated with remitted MDD. And what are these joint components constitute of? So I listed the top 5 features with the highest loadings of each component. So basically this first jive joint component loaded heavily on physical activity features, which is like volume of the activity, like total activity count, and sedentary time, and then also moderate to vigorous physical activity, and active to sedentary transition probability, and total log transformed activity. So basically, you are more likely to have episode or MDD lifetime when you have a less active, So, and same for the second component, joint component. So these are second joint component mostly consist of the sleep features, which is sleep midpoint, sleep wake up, sleep onset. So these MDD, major depressive disorder, is associated mostly with delayed time and of the sleep. So delayed midpoint, delayed wake up, delayed onset of the sleeps. And then for the joint 4 component is actually consists of the domains across the 3 domains. So whereas joint 1 is mostly physical activity, joint 2 is mostly sleep features, joint 4 is circadian rhythms as well as physical activity, duration of light physical activity, and also a sleep efficiency. And so for the variability features, none of the joint component is associated with the MDD, and then sleep, individual sleep component, and individual circadian rhythmicity, second circadian rhythmicity component is associated with MDD current, whereas first circadian component, individual component, is associated with the lifetime or remitted. so there must be a missed opportunity to explore the potentials in variability if we only look at the averages of the features. And so these are the findings. So we found that the application of Jive led to the reduction of the 28 accelerometry features to 4 joint and 6 individual components for the averages, and then joint components explains like a lot of the total variations in sleep, physical activity, and circadian rhythms for the average features, but not so much in the variability features. And both quarantine remitted depression were associated with the 2 joint factors, distinguished by the physical activity patterns and sleep timings. And the 4th joint factor are reflected in more like a dysregulation of all 3 domains and more strongly associated with the depression state than the trait. And of course, there are some limitations. We use the unsupervised approaches. There is a supervised approaches which we are planning to apply. And then also the findings are based on the 2 weeks of the measurements of the actigraphy. And maybe because this is like relatively older population, so may not be generalized to different age ethnic groups. And so the conclusion is like application of this multimodal data reduction technique to objectively derived physical activity revealed that mood disorders, especially MDD, may be partly driven by the common factors underlying the cross-domain processes, rather than those unique to sleep or activity or circadian rhythms. And findings are consistent with the physical activity patterns and their timing as a trait marker for depression, whereas sleep disturbance reflects more of the depressive state. And this work illustrates the values of the accelerometry as a potential biomarker for subtypes of the depression and highlights the importance of consideration of the full 24-hour sleep-wake cycles in future studies. And here are my acknowledgements. And I thank all the collaborators, and I thank my supervisor. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kang. Yeah, since we have about 7 minutes, yeah, I'd like to wrap up. Yeah, thank you to all our speakers for their wonderful talks. And now I will conclude our session with my presentation titled XOMI's Association Study of Bipolar Disorder Anabaptist Family. So, yeah, I will share screen. And I'll make PowerPoint. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's my title. And okay, what is ambiguous whole exome sequencing study? It's study about the genetics of bipolar disorder in Amish Mennonite community. Our samples are largely from isolated families collected in the US and Brazil. And this study aims to characterize the high-risk rare genetic variants that may increase the risk of the bipolar and related disorders. We focus on founder effect and genetic drift as the mild frequency of those variants is expected to be different from the general population. Our whole exome sequencing data were performed by Rujendra for our study. So bipolar disorder phenotype considered in this study includes bipolar 1 patient, bipolar 2 with the recurrent depression, bipolar 2 with a single episode depression, bipolar not otherwise specified, schizoaffective mania, manic schizoaffective bipolar, schizoaffective depressed, schizophrenia, recurrent major depressive disorder patient. So to find the association between bipolar disorder phenotype and our ambigen sample, I use SAGE method, SAGE-GENE method. And SAGE-GENE method is generalized mixed model association test using saddle point approximation to calibrate the distribution of score test statistic. It can be applied to binary and continuous phenotype and related and unrelated samples. It can also incorporate covariate as well. So quality control for whole exome sequencing data was done at the sample level and the marker level. And the final data set we have of the quality control for the SAGE gene method would be, gene method is about 0.5 million exome sequencing autosomal variant in 820 individuals from 277 families. We have about 1-to-1 ratio case control, the patient, and about 540 USA sample and about 280 Brazilian sample, and about equal number of males and female. And the covariate used in this model is sex and 10 population stratification PCA component. Annotation information was obtained using ensemble variant effect predictor. So 2 level of analysis was done. One is for the single marker level, and the other one is gene level analysis. For the gene level analysis, three types of variant selection scheme were considered. One, A, minor frequency to look for the rare variant, minor frequency less than 1%, and B, VEP impact level, so to look for the variant by function. C, heterozygous variants shared by a first degree affected sample to take advantage of our family data sharing. Gene level tests were carried out with the variants in sets of A, or A and B, or A and C, or A and B and C. So this is the result for the single marker level, and the most significant top variant are shown here. And the most significant variant is on ACAP7 gene with the p-value 1.19 to the minus 7, when the significance level after bone chronic correction is about 1.e to the minus 7. This is a gene level analysis result by A and A and B. This is A, considering minor frequency only, and A and B is minor frequency and their function. So again, ACAP7 gene is exome-wise significant based on moderate variant with minor frequency less than 1%. This is another gene level analysis considering the variable selection scheme A and C, A and B and C. So A and C is here. This is the minor frequency less than 1% variant and shared by four first degree affected relatives. And this is minor frequency and 4 first degree affected variants and by function. So these 2 genes are significant after bone correction level. So we have 3 genes, ACAP7, DYRK4, and KANG, and these are the list of the variants included in this gene level analysis. And as you see, this is that there are 3 minor earlier frequency column in this result. And as you can see, our markers in our sample is a lot higher than general population. So when you consider the affection rate among carriers, for the ACAP7 gene, we have 20 carriers, and out of 20, 18 of them are affected, so 90% affection rate. For the DYRK4, we have 88% affection rate, and for the KANG1C, we have a 62% affection rate, which is quite high. Quite high for all 3 genes. So, conclusion. The single variant on ACAP7 gene in chromosome 6 was significantly associated with bipolar phenotype considered. Gene level analysis results support the association between bipolar phenotype and 3 genes, ACAP7, DYRK4, and KANG1C gene. Thank you. And I'd like to conclude our session 29.
Thank you very much. This is perfect on time. Thank you, Dr. Song.
Welcome. Thank you for I'd like to thank all the committee in IDWSDS for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next session